Right, today's story, we're going back to the late 1920s, early 1930s, and we're going to talk about a pit that in the big scheme of things never really would have got remembered in the annals of British coal mining. And we're going back to the Naworth coalfield when the pits themselves were back in the hands of the Carlyles. Charlie Roberts, who was Lady Carlisle's son-in-law, he had been a Liberal MP. In fact, he'd been in Asquith's government. He'd been Under Secretary of State for India. There was him. Leif Jones had also been a Liberal MP, I think for Appleby. He was part of the company, as was a guy called Lowther and Murray. I'm a bit sketchy on the others. But they'd taken over after the Naworth Coal Company went bust around about 1924. Now, it's a bad time. We've got a big trade depression and a bigger trade depression coming on. And the principal pit that the Naworth collieries were then working, the gears, was kind of coming to its natural end. So we're going to be talking about a colliery that was driven in the late 1920s. And it had a great potential, theoretically, on paper. There was, in theory, an almost inexhaustible supply of coal left by the old Roachburn after the disaster. There was millions of tons of little limestone coal going out towards Hartley Burn, and they put a drift in right next to where the disaster actually happened, near where the inundation happened, and it went in very steep. Now, at the time that that drift was put in, which was the brainchild of the then colliery manager Danny Sinclair, men who'd been laid off from the gears because as the pit was nearly finished they were being laid off, they had asked Charlie Roberts to help them open up the old venture drift. In fact, they got Charlie Roberts to okay it with the Dole office that they could still get the Dole while they cleared the drift out and got it into coal production. Obviously all the profits will go to Naworth Collieries Limited, but they were going to open it. So we're going to listen to some words today from Andrew Ruddick, who was interviewed in the 1970s by a guy by the name of Andrew Tickner, who did some fantastic local oral history. Sadly no longer with us, and he gave me permission to use this material over 30 years ago. So you'll be hearing Andrew's voice. Now Andrew is going to talk all about, he's going to mention the venture. We're going to do about the venture, or the venture as they call it, on a different episode. But he's going to mention that, and we're going to show some drone footage of it because it fits in with the story. But we're interested in what Andrew has to say about the Backstand, or Denton Drift. It was locally known as the Backstand. It was a different period as well, whereas the old men like the Thompsons, they'd only taken about three seams mainly. They'd taken the Craig Noots, the Wells Syke and the Slag, a bit of low main, because they said they couldn't make any money out of the 2'6" and things like that. Now we arrive in the 1930s and they're taking those other seams, they're taking the canal, they're taking the high and the low main, because it's all that's left basically, but it's saleable coal. But the pits that they're working, like I said, the gears was running out of coal. They've been at Mint Hill. It had been successful but only short term, so they were looking for a new long-term winning really to take over from the gears. So when they started up at the Backstand, it was hopeful that that would be a long-term winning. As it was, well, you'll have to continue watching to see, won't you? And it was connected to the old Howard Screens by an aerial flight. And like a few of the local aerial flights, it wasn't that successful. Anyway, let's get up Denton Fell. It was a lovely sunny Sunday afternoon, and as you see, we've got some footage from a few years before. So welcome to the Backstand and an introduction to the venture. Well, we kind of really are up in the middle of nowhere today. We're up on Denton Fell on the Backstand, and I've come to do some filming for the Roachburn disaster. But while we're here, I thought we'd have a look at the remains of Denton Drift. Me and Ian Hebson were up here a couple of years ago, and I've got some footage which you're going to see, and I've just never got a chance to use it. So the Backstand, Denton Drift, it dates the late 20s, early 1930s really, and it was done during Charlie Roberts' era. And it was a brainchild, so I sort of understand, of Danny Sinclair, who was then their manager. According to what Andrew Ruddick said in his memoirs, that this was Danny's sort of pet project. And at a meeting of Charlie Roberts and Liv Jones. Andrew Ruddick was there, Danny Sinclair and all the other worthies were there. Charlie Roberts said to Andrew Ruddick, remember the Ruddicks and the Woofs, they'd reopened, with Charlie Roberts' help obviously, they'd reopened the venture drift on their own backs really. They believed in that, and Charlie Roberts said thanks to Andrew Ruddick and the Woofs because the profits that the ventures made us has helped us reopen Denton Drift, and apparently Mr. Sinclair didn't like it. I think Andrew did say how many pumps were here. It wasn't successful. As we know, any of you that know about Roachburn, the coal goes down at 1 in 1 from here. It just straight down at 45 degrees. They put the drift in steeper to kind of get up. Well, they put the drift in, have a look if it was steeper, not quite. It's really steep. To go under and leave a pillar from where the disaster and the old workings were, and then to get into the coal the other side that was kind of left with Jubilee and everything. But according to Andrew, he said the men weren't sort of written to work in it really. Yeah, working at those gradients aren't ideal, and with a thought on your back as well of any more inundations, I suppose. But well, I'll show you where the open cast was, because they came back in the 1990s and open cast here, and that again was a total disaster. Now it's like the flash down at Lee at Plank Lane. It looks beautiful now. So this was the open cast. What you can see now, it looks beautiful, doesn't it? When I first came up, moved up here in the early 1990s, it wasn't like this. It was totally desolate. But this is it now, and we're right next to where the backstand actually went in 1908 for the Roachburn disaster. The crater's here just in front of me. So we'll have a good wander around, take you back a couple of years with me and Ian when we had a bit of an explore, and I'll show you on maps and plans exactly what the Denton Drift was about. There's not a lot of a story to say, but I've saved you the walk up here, haven't I? It could be like a wildlife place now, couldn't it? You know.
I think that's what they've probably left it a mess and then gone, oh well, we might as well make it sort of a wildlife haven, and it's probably how they got the money to sort of sort it out.
I mean, if you were near a civilization, you can imagine a water ski ramp, can't you? Yeah. You know what I mean?
No, I've got another bend here, so there's obviously been somewhere in this.
Them two there, one there. But that quite possibly is further up, you're right. See what I mean, just in front of you? Is it not just a trick of the light?
I don't know whether it's like been just like a bund around, you know, like a, I don't know. Oh yeah, there's all sorts of bolts and stuff here.
And there's another one there, Eb.
Right. When you look at an aerial shot of Knockshinock, it's quite close to the sort of civilization, whereas here it's, you know, oh, we need to take a load of stuff and tip it down the hole. Well, yeah.
Yeah, I think he dragged it up on horses and sleds.
Right, yeah.
And that's how we started at the venture. Cannon was kicked off one Monday morning. As I said, Danny Sinclair was the manager at that particular time, and he was against it, you know, just because we were setting out on our own. And Miller, the last manager was here, he'd been a pitman, right for the bottom sort of style. I know, you know, a Scotsman. And he set another drift away. He believed in it. I can mind in one meeting, that was before Danny left, Danny Sinclair. There was nobody had a great, I couldn't say that there was anybody had a great lot of respect for him, you know. No, there was one particular meeting After we started and the coal was coming out like at the venture, Mr. Roberts, there was Leaf Jones and Mr. Roberts, Mr. Lowther, and Sintler himself and Herbert Finlayson, the secretary. And I just forgetting who he was with me at the particular time, no mind. Roberts congratulated me. He says, "Do you know, Mr. Rudick?" He says, "Your faith in the venture at the start, you've put a lot of hard work in." He says, "I know you have." He says, "But I've got to admit," he says, what the venture's profits has made for us has helped us to open Denton." And I said, "That was the biggest mistake that ever you made." And by he jumped up. He wasn't a big fella, but he jumped up, and was he not nasty? Didn't like the idea the profits coming for the venture to waste over at Denton. And Leaf Jones told him off in the nicest possible manner. Started with a bakery and keep moving around till it was talking less and less and less. And he never said a slang word or a wrong word, but he did tell Danny Sintler off nice that night that he was talking to his employer. And when Miller come, he come up, wasn't long here till he come up, like he went up the venter. And he waited that night. I was on back shift. He waited that particular night till I got my report signed. I was deputy. And I come across the file together, you see. We were trespassing, really. We shouldn't have come across the file, but it was an eye cut. And there was a bowl in there too, but we used to venture it. And there's a big lump of outcrop limestone, only the size of that settee, but about 4 foot tall, sticking out just this side of the Forest Heath Quarry, between the Forest Head Quarry and Totai. And Miller stopped at it. He says, "What'll that be?" And I said, and Denton wasn't going at all. She was stopped, like she was lying off. They wasn't walking her, then at that particular date. And I said to Miller, Miller said, "That'll be a good place to put Danny's pumps. I don't know many pumps that drowned, in Denton." I says, "What's wrong with her? She isn't walking just now." He says, "No, I'll tell you, Mr. Rudick." He says, "The longer she stands, the better she pays." I just thought to myself, well, you haven't much faith in her anyway. Well, you see, the Saturday away, I just practically give the man that put the drift in all credit due to them, because I went over on Sunday afternoon, me and the missus and the 3 bairns, the youngsters, to have a look just to see how they're getting on, and then made a good job of the drift. But then it was right practically where the Backstand went in eventually. Oh, do you mean doom, Oh, guys, the man was frightened to walk in her, And she was making that much water. It took 2 and 3 pumps, keep pumping. And that's how Danny Sintler come to get the kick. It was a mines inspector. Eventually he took his ticket off him, You see, there was some place that he had to have something done, and done right away. And Danny said yes. He says, "I'll see to it." Well, the inspector, I don't know whether he really believed him or what he thought about him or what now. But he wasn't away such a long time till he come back. And it still wasn't done. And he pulled him up again about it, you see. And he was going to see to it right away, and he come back again. And it wasn't done, and that was it. That's you finished. Took his ticket home.
So here we are then, Denton Drift. The leaseor, or who owns the minerals, is MRH Estates, which I think stands for Murray, Roberts, and is it Henley or Hanley? I do forget. They own the minerals, obviously Roberts, Charlie Roberts. And the lessees, well, Charlie Roberts was sort of leasing off his cell. They're now with Colliery Company Limited. Now abandoned in December of 1935, but the last coal was actually drawn during March of 1934. So let's look on the auxiliary plan of where it is. That is where the Backstand ponds went in. Those are the Backstand ponds. Is that the crater? But anyway, this is where the drift actually went in. It doesn't appear on any Ordnance Survey maps that I've actually seen. So we've got 2 drifts, haulage drift and obviously an air drift. And these are the old Roachburn workings. This, I think, is where the actual backstand went in. That'll be the last board on the number 9. And if we look across here, we've got the number 7 shaft. Denton number 7, which was an air shaft. A ladder was in there, and a lot of the men that were caught in the disaster escaped the pit up there. Now, I did say that when the drift was put in, it went under the old Roachburn workings, leaving a barrier of coal. Well, I'm wrong. It went over. If we look A and B, we've got a section on A and B. There's the surface. Now, the drift goes down originally a very steep 1 in 1.6. Then at this point, it levels off slightly to 1 in 4, which is still very steep, Upton Valley Drift for 1 in 4. And then down again at 1 in 1.37 till it gets to the bottom of the basin. You see, they've left this barrier of coal here. There's the old workings, Roachburn workings. They've left this barrier of coal to where the bottom of the basin is, where it starts, the gradient changes greatly. And this is like where the Jubilee was kind of heading for, the Jubilee district in Roachburn. And theoretically, it's a massive stretch of coal. The reserves are vast. Here we've got a seam section of the Little Limestone. The main seam, the main block of coal is 3'6", sitting on 2" of clay on a ganister floor. There's a slight slate band there, or a bit of stone in the coal, and then we've got another 9" up to this shale and sandstone roof. So if you look on the geological survey, this is a cross section, mind you, across, and this is the outcrop of the Little Limestone coal along from Roachburn over Denton Fell. Can you see how steep it drops? And it's missed off, but then it does level out slightly till it gets to the Great Stubblick Dyke. There's a Great Stubblick fault, and the Little Limestone coal, the other side of the dyke, which is about 1,600 feet if I remember rightly, is back up there. But the stretch of coal itself, that is its sort of width, if you will, from there up to that fault. So opening up the survey, again here we are going across Denton Fell. That dotted line is a Little Limestone coal. We've got boreholes and shafts. There's one of the shafts. I'm not sure if that's not Denton number 7 shaft. That's the wind dyke actually. That's what that is, that's a wind dyke. But the area of coal goes all the way to here, the Great Stubblick Dyke. There's Lamley and Midgehome. But as we travel east, we get to the end of the map, and theoretically the Little Limestone coal would be all the way under here, because it was worked right up until 2000 and 2001 at the newer Blenkinsop Colliery on this side of the wind dyke. So if they could have made Denton Colliery successful, it would have run for many, many years, probably would have been nationalised. As it was, it didn't, and that coal is still there, sterilised, and it probably never ever will see the light of day. We don't have to drive too far up the line before we come into some coal mining history. This is the old Howard engine drift. Somebody did try to reopen it in the 1970s. Here we've got a couple of pieces of limestone, Little Limestone coal from the Howard. Apparently it was some of the best quality Little Limestone coal in this area. But the Howard itself dates from 1870, about 1875, and closed around 1890, between 1890 and 1895, around about 1892. But it worked the area under what was the Coal Fell, what the old Coal Fell colliery that dated from, well, we've got engineering plans of the Coal Fell colliery or Wingate colliery from the 1720s, and also boring plans from the 1520s, believe it or not, further up Greenside Rig. And this worked out under the railway through this drift here. So this is the Howard colliery, and just further along the railway you'll see where there was a pumping shaft, and they used to have an old locomotive jacked up there, apparently with its with a wheel off, and the steam engine was working the pumps. So we'll see if we can see that as we go further along. We've got some more industrial relics here near where the Howard pit was, and you can see some heaps behind me. Now that was the Howard screens. The screens were built actually to screen and wash coal from the Denton Colliery, the Backstand, which was opened in the late 20s, early 1930s. And we can see there's an old tub left here. You see where the over rope used to go through? And the old screens in the background. We've got some photos of it, and it was later used as well, the screens, to wash the coal, the screen from the modern mid-zone bottoms colliery. The loading point was further along the line, and the coal was brought here to the screens and then sent off down to the plain head. So this is the Howard screens. The aerial flight went right across the fell from here, right over there, for about 2 miles, right up onto Denton Fell, near actually where the Roachburn disaster, where the crater came. That flooded the Roachburn pit from the Backstand ponds. I thought we'd have a look at these statistics from the mineral statistics. Naworth Collieries in 1931, here are the pits that they're working. Denton, Danny Sinclair is the manager. They've got 41 people underground and 29 on the surface. The Gears, well, they're down to 43 underground there and 13 surface workers, and we've got Mint Hill at 27 underground and 10 on the surface. Now the following year we can see that they've taken over, they're working the Craignook Drift, which was what we know as Pep's Pit, and there's 28 men there. Now notice Denton, it's gone up to 97 men underground and 24 on the surface. The Gears still at 42 and Mint Hill down to 26 as that's running out of coal. And in fact it was abandoned during February of 1932. So obviously a lot of the Mint Hill men then have gone up to the Denton Drift. And I just went on also to the 1935. Again, they're still working the Craignook Drift there, Pep's old pit. Denton has gone, like I said, abandoned during December of 1935. The Gears, well, we know that was soon to be abandoned, and that's down to 10. And there we've got the Venture Arch Drift, which we talk about also in the video. 47 men working there, 22 on the surface. It seems an awful lot. That must include, you would think, a lot of these surface workers, including people who are working on the railway and the screens and things. Who knows? But I just thought that was interesting to look at those statistics there. Well, the aerial flight was never that successful like some of the other aerial flights in the area. So these images are of different aerial flights, not of the Denton one. Anyway, I hope you've enjoyed this video, and I look forward to seeing you next time. So remember, like, subscribe and share, and as always, I'll catch you later.